take a big breath. It's Monday. It's Valentine's Day. Happy Monday to you all. I spent the morning racing around with 2 children and getting my son into his pediatrician. He got an eye injury last week at school, which ended up being an ER visit. So we've had kind of a traumatic time around here, but we're settling back in, and he's at school with a care plan so his eye doesn't get whacked again. Oh, the joys. Alrighty. And I got an emailed, I think, a couple questions. I wanted to be sure to address those on the call. They were good questions. I'm just going to pull them up. I'm also going to open the chat. And if you have a question today, you're welcome to raise your hand. I see Marsha already had hers raised. And we will get started. Happy to help answer any questions you have. Marsha, what's your question? Let's start with yours.
Okay, let me unmute here. So I'm starting to think about doing joint ventures or some kind of partnering things with people and realizing, okay, there's stuff I need to know, which I don't know. I looked on your website. I see you have a joint venture agreement and it's also part of a package. Yep. I've already purchased, what was it? Something in there, the consulting agreement.
And let me look, Marsha. I'm going to pop in and make sure. I'm going to see if you got the JV Ready upgrade, because I know you purchased the website protection package.
I did that, and I did the consulting agreement, and I did one other agreement separately.
Okay. So let me look really quick, and we will get you squared away. Okay. Yeah, so you've got the website protection package. I see a separate agreement, and then you must have done another one on one of the sales. Let me just look really quick. Consulting agreement. And then this one just has the 30% off. I'd need to go look at what it is. So yeah, let's talk briefly about the, because I've got a couple ways that you can get the JV agreement, and I only offer it to people that show up and have like a very specific need in this department, because I've got the bigger bundle that it's a part of, which is the business evolution package. Right. You can get it on its own. I actually offered both the JV agreement and the affiliate agreement as part of an upgrade to a website protection package, like workshop that I had. This was a year or two ago. But the benefit of that workshop is that I've got a really detailed recording, multiple hour recording, where I walk through and teach about that JV agreement.
Oh, okay. Like agreement. You did with the website one.
Like I did with the really website protection package. Yeah. So we walk through it together. I talk about all of the, not all, but as much as I can in that amount of time, kinds of things that can come up, how to address those in the agreement, how to, as much as possible, set yourself up for success when it comes to joint ventures. And for other people on the call, let's talk about what the difference is between a joint venture and an affiliate type of scenario, because those terms I've noticed get used quite interchangeably sometimes in the online space, and they're not the same thing. So an affiliate scenario is where you have the primary offer, right? If you're a coach or a consultant or some kind of expert, you've got an offer or a service, and somebody is mailing or marketing on your behalf, right? That's an affiliate scenario. A JV scenario is where 2 people come together, and let me let Kathleen in. 2 people come together and create something essentially new, right? Something from scratch. And it's a true, and I'm just going to, let's see, what she's connected. There we go. Okay. It's a true, hi, Kathleen. It's a true joint venture. We're just talking for a minute about the difference between JVs and affiliate scenarios. So again, affiliate, there's a primary offer, a primary business. Somebody is mailing or essentially marketing on your behalf. A joint venture is where 2 people get together and say, for example, and there's multiple kinds of joint ventures. The type that I typically support people with are what I call project-based joint ventures, right? So they're like, let's test out a joint program together. Like they're each bringing things to the table, but it's not that they're creating a whole new business model or setting up a level of business where, for example, they're going to go to their state and form a whole new business entity and go through all of the initial startup costs that generally requires. For most people, I recommend they start with a project-based joint venture to iron out some of the details, right? Test the idea. Is it viable? Share the proceeds and run those proceeds into two businesses that are already set up that have come together for this particular project. If you determine after some length of time, like, look, we work really well together, this is definitely a fit, we feel like it's viable, then it might make sense to invest in the rest of the business startup costs, like setting up a separate entity, et cetera, right? It looks like Marilyn's connecting for a minute. Welcome to Marilyn. We're just talking for a moment about the difference between joint ventures and affiliate arrangements, affiliate programs. So Marcia, that's where those two things, often when people are ready for affiliate agreements and launching their own affiliate program, they're also doing things that look like JVs. They're collaborating with other people in other ways, or they're testing out kind of a project-based model that maybe they're co-creating a course together or doing, a summit or short-term event together. And they just need to determine, because even those things can take a bit of work to put together and plenty of money, depending on if you're hiring support or staff to help you execute something like that, right? So it's really helpful. The thing that I love about the JV agreement is it comes with, I want to say, I don't know, 5 or 6 pages. It's called the JV preparation guide of questions that you walk through with a potential JV partner to make sure that you've thought about the JV in the right way, that you've thought about what happens if, what happened, because if you're setting something up and you're splitting cost, you're splitting profit, you're going to the effort of taking on this business project, you want to be really clear what happens with the IP. What happens if one of us gets bored with the project and wants to walk away partway through, right? Who owns what at that point? And the answer to that question might be different if somebody gets bored and just wants out versus somebody gets sick or has something tragic in their family and has to get out. Right. So there's a lot of these unknowns that, regardless the size of the project, can involve pretty significant business and IP issues. And so what I tell people is slowing down at the front end and just doing a bit of advanced work can really save a lot of bumps and heartache on the back end. And it's just about communication, right? The other thing I say is no contract can save you from the wrong business partner or the wrong client or the wrong, right? So our relationships are really as good as the people in them are ethical and clear and, operating out of good faith and all of that stuff. But if you learn how to approach those scenarios the right way, you can really do a lot of advanced preparation that will help to make sure that they go more smoothly, that when issues do come up, you know how to handle them because you've already talked about a lot of them, right? So that is available basically as a duo. You could get both the JV and affiliate agreement at once if you're ready for it. I can email you information about that.
Yeah, why don't you email me? I don't really know that I need the affiliate yet.
Okay.
The extra webinar and things sound really helpful. So
okay.
I might
and even if you just needed the JV agreement, that's fine. I could still drop you into that training, and then you just wouldn't really have to pay attention to the affiliate side of it once you're in that section.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you send me the information? I'll decide which seems like the best way to go.
Okay. That sounds good. You're welcome. Great question. I see both Jody and Barbara have hands up. How can I help you guys? Jody, why don't you, or Barbara, it looks like you unmuted. Barbara, you go next, and then Jody.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
I'm looking for hard evidence of how the small business person is affected by content theft. So we hear about the record companies, the movie studios, the $52 billion, but how small businesses can't relate to that. So there are plenty of stories and anecdotal, but I'm looking for, some people need statistics to come to grips with the reality. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas for where I can search for that kind of information.
Well, for statistics on like intellectual property issues that small businesses face, or is it specifically content theft?
Well, I suppose statistics about what they face in terms of IP would be good. And then this maybe is part of that. Maybe this is within it, the content theft, the infringement. How often does it happen?
Yeah,
What's the impact on their business?
Right. I've got a lot of statistics on small businesses, and I'm happy to run through a few of those. In regards to IP, though, I'm not sure I've got a comprehensive data set on like what percentages of small businesses, for example, face IP theft. What I will say is that one of the number one reasons that clients find me is because somebody has taken their content and they're trying to figure out what to do about it. So it is one of the leading reasons that people end up reaching out to me for legal support, is that they have already launched an online website, a program, a course, and somebody has taken their information, or they're about to launch and they've heard so many horror stories from their colleagues in this space that they're like, I want to do it right from the start. What do I need? Right. So it is one of the primary drivers of why people show up at my doorstep. I don't know what the statistics are on that. But, you know, from a general IP perspective, the businesses that I support across the board, 90% of the value of those businesses are based on their IP, right? I work with experts, consultants, coaches, online educators. Like the value of their business is based on their systems, their frameworks, the intellectual property they use to populate their courses and their programs and their services, right? So it's an extremely important aspect of the particular kinds of small businesses that I support. So it's really paramount. And one of the other, oh, perfect. Yeah, Kathleen, I see your message. I can send that to you as well. One of the other issues with IP that, you know, because there's IP theft. What do you do once you've experienced a loss, a data breach, you know, whatever is happening with your IP? But where I try to catch people is obviously ahead of that time. How do we get terms in place to protect all of your online content and programs? How do we get primary client service agreements in place for any of your offline services, so that when you're, you know, through your live coaching or live consulting or even your workshops or trainings, when you are essentially exposing that IP, you already have terms in place in your client service agreements that say, here's what you can do with the content, here's what you can't do, right? So it's really important. I call like contracts and terms the gatekeeper. They're the gatekeeper. Before you expose people and let them into your business and into your services, you have those terms in place that define the relationship, define what can be done with your IP, et cetera, right? But then, yeah, certainly we get into other strategies of what do you do once your IP has been infringed? And that's very different depending on what's happened.
So many small businesses think that their presence online is too small for them to be become victims of theft.
And not only victims of theft, let's talk about even what happens when you just don't know the rules, because one of the other primary reasons people will reach out to me or end up having some troubles is they've hired support in their business, like marketing support or a VA, or back to Marcia's example of the JV versus affiliate, they've launched an affiliate program and they now have people doing things on behalf of their businesses that they essentially do not control. And there are ways, if you're hiring support, if you're hiring staff, if you're hiring independent contractors to do certain things, that you can make sure that you maintain control. But one of the most frequent ways small businesses in the online space get in trouble is with copyright infringement, where they accidentally infringe the rights of somebody else. And it's just purely because they end up remaining ignorant of the law. And, they don't realize like, oh, snagging an image or an infographic off the internet is problematic. And, I wish people would slow down just a bit to think about, how, even from an ethical perspective, how problematic that is, which is why across the board, I tell people, if you did not create the content yourself, doesn't matter the content, written content, visual content, infographic, image, whatever it is, music, right? If you did not create it yourself, or pay somebody to create it and have terms in place that covers that arrangement, or you don't have a licensing agreement in place that says specifically what the terms of that license are, you should not be using that content. It's problematic and you're at risk of a potential infringement scenario.
When I talk with businesses and say, you don't want to infringe, I have had the response, oh, we won't infringe. And if we do, we'll buy our way out of it. And so.
And are these small businesses? What size businesses are you working with?
Small and medium size. So they don't know what they don't know, which we don't know everything. But so I have had to say, you don't want your stuff to be stolen. So that they don't realize the risk of
and the conversation that I would be having with my clients that would would be of that size is like, look, you're responsible. I'd be talking about business leadership, right? You're responsible for your own business leadership, and the struggle that small businesses face is at some point they are doing everything themselves, right? Before they learn how to grow and scale and build team and outsource. They generally don't have in-house legal counsel, in-house financial counsel, in-house other, you know what I mean? They have to kind of like pick and choose their needs as they come up. And yet so many of the issues that we see from a legal perspective in the online space would be solved by proper leadership and ethics. I tell people constantly a big dose of just ethics would solve the vast majority of problems that I see in the online space. And so, I'd really push them on what is their commitment level to business leadership, because if they're committed, then they want to understand the rules and play by the rules so that they not only elevate the level of their own business, but the performance of their clients. When we're informed, like, and I do a lot of speaking around this as well. It's our responsibility as a small business to help create the clients that we want to see arrive at our doorstep. And the way that we do that is through clear communication, advance notices of our business policies. Like, there are numerous ways through various touch points with our business we can actually help to create the client that we want, right? But as businesses, we're all responsible for our own level of leadership. And so, if somebody shows up and wants to skimp on, doing things the right way, or, well, I don't really want to address that legal issue because it doesn't seem important to me, then I just say, okay, come back when you're ready to address it the right way, because I'm not going to sell you a shortcut. It doesn't serve anybody, including the business.
Well, the phrase content theft is rampant. And I'm trying to put a number to that. Why do we read content theft is rampant? So that's why I'm looking for numbers.
Well, and it sounds like content theft is a very specific, because theft overall, I mean, there's lots of statistics about theft relating to online business. I mean, even from, customer theft and consumer theft, right? Like, friendly fraud or chargeback theft accounts for 86% of online theft when it comes to credit card usage, right? So there's a lot of theft generally that happens in the online space, and it happens with content as well. The reason being is that in the online world, we're all one step removed from each other. You guys have shown up to this call. I can look at your face. We can develop some rapport. That often doesn't happen with a lot of online businesses, especially if they're selling products or digital automated services, right? Somebody can just show up and purchase and maybe not have a pre-established relationship with somebody. And what it means is that they don't slow down to think about the impacts of certain unethical actions. And so people are constantly surprised when somebody has purchased a course or program or product, and then not very long later, they're turning around and basically copying word for word what happened inside that course and calling it their own and launching it on their own website. Right. So it just happens. And I don't know the statistics, but I do tell people the more visibility you have, the more clients you serve, the more likely this is to happen to you, and probably pretty consistently. Right. So you have to have a plan in place to address it.
So you mentioned that you do have some statistics about IP in businesses.
Yeah.
Where might I go to look for those?
Well, if you were to just spend some time on Googling theft and small business, I would start with a broader category than just content theft. And you could look at intellectual property statistics generally for small business. You'll find some interesting things within those buckets, but I think you need to go a little wider because not everybody is going to call it content theft.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Barbara. Okay,
Yeah.
Jody, and I see that Carrie and Marilyn also have hands up.
Hi, yes, thank you for doing this.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge real quickly, I did see David pop a quick question in the chat about playing a 20-minute YouTube video in your monthly coaching call. So a couple things, David. Yeah, using other people's copyrighted content or content that is subject to copyright protection for any commercial purpose, if it's not your own, is generally problematic, right? So again, that gets back to if it's not yours, if you haven't created it, especially when it comes to use in business. It'd be one thing if like you were a news station or you were using it as satire. There are certain exemptions to what are called fair use, copyright exemptions, right? There are certain exemptions to the copyright laws, which basically prohibit all use of copyrighted material that belongs to somebody else. That's going to be really problematic if you're recording your monthly calls. So for example, if you record your monthly calls, you play somebody else's video or music, this surprises people constantly. They've got a program that they're running and they take an intermission for 7 minutes where they're not even speaking, but they're playing music that is subject to copyright protection. That video will be taken down. If it's hosted on one of the public platforms, there are software services that plug into those platforms specifically for copyright infringement purposes, and it will flag your content as infringing content because you're utilizing third-party material that's copyrighted in your video, and then that video will be taken down, or you cannot play it until you fix it and remove that. So generally the rule is, if you've not created it, especially for use in your business, because there are very few exceptions that apply for commercial use, I'd say no. The safest thing is that, play a video that you've created that has you instructing on that topic, or address that topic from a different perspective, but you do the training on it. Don't use other people's content.
So could I instead, it's a person that I'm kind of promoting in the call. If I were to send him an email and say, hey, this YouTube video that you give to everybody, to freely,
can I play it? Yeah. Can I play it in my coaching group?
Tell them how to contact you and kind of promote him to get direct source information from him. If I had an email, would that be permission enough if he gave me?
Yeah, if you accurately describe the use and you got written consent in some format, email's fine. Yes, you've been granted a license to use that content for that way. So that's the other thing I recommend is, like, if somebody, especially if they know the individual, even if they don't, sometimes I'll just say, why don't you reach out and ask whether you can share this in that specific format with attribution? Now, the thing about that is some people are going to say yes, and some people are going to say no. So be prepared to get a no. And, and there are some folks who really come to me kind of asking, but they're going to do their own thing anyways. Not everybody surprisingly takes my advice. So the downside of asking for advance permission, if you plan to do whatever you want with it anyways, is you are now flagged on their radar as somebody who is paying attention to their content.
Okay.
Right.
'Cause, yeah, and I did a thing on, I posted a video where I was playing an audio recording of a seller call. So it was a training call, but it was recorded. It got uploaded to Facebook because that's where the private membership group is.
Mm-hmm.
So the Zoom recording is uploaded to Facebook. Facebook scanned that and found what it says was copyright material because I played my own recorded phone call. Actually, it was with a bank. It wasn't with a seller, but it was with the bank. And in the recording, the bank has that time before they come on the line.
The holiday music or the elevator music.
Yeah. And
Yep.
Facebook flagged that as being something.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You cannot post on a public platform anything like that that has music that you do not have a license to share. And so this is why if you're going to do intermission, or like you maybe would have to go edit that video, David, so that that particular piece of it is just chopped out and nobody hears music. That's the way that you fix that if you want to re-upload it. But it's because these services literally scan each of those platforms looking for copyrighted content. And if they find it, boom, you're done. That video gets taken down or can't be shown.
Even though it was my own recorded phone call with the bank.
That's right. It's like producing your own YouTube recording, right? Because you can stream live to YouTube or through Zoom or any number of services. I mean, that's what those platforms are, is millions of third parties are creating their own content, but that's the risk, is that within that content, they've utilized somebody else's music, somebody else's image, somebody else's whatever.
But you can take out the music and then it would be okay, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they flagged. Okay, so even though it's my recording, my problem was reposting it on Facebook.
With that music, with third-party music that you did not have a license to use in any manner.
Okay, even though they forced me to listen to it for 6 months.
That's right. The key is editing that out before you post that video. Oh, hilarious. Thanks.
Did you also tell me once the name of the software? Did you have a video editing software that you liked? Did you tell me that already once?
I might have. I mean, I've for the longest time used iMovie, right, on my own device, but I'm a Mac user, so everything of mine is Mac. I'm sure there are other really good video editing softwares out there, depending on what your base system is. So, yeah, I don't really have many other thoughts on that, but I outsource most of my editing these days and would rather not deal with it. Okay, David, great question. Jody, thanks for your patience. How can we help you today?
No problem. I hope this is a simple question. So I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado, and I would like to branch into coaching. I've been told that we have to create an entirely new entity for the business if we want to separate coaching from businessing. My bookkeeper suggested that possibly we could do a separate bank account, separate website, and then just have my coaching business under the umbrella of my business that I already have as a counselor. No.
Nope. And the reason why, let's talk about why. And from a bookkeeping perspective, that may make sense because there are often small businesses that have kind of like two wings of their business, right? But from a liability standpoint and a licensing standpoint, that's where you're stuck because you are a licensed professional. You essentially don't have the option of doing that because you're going to be restricted by state lines. You're going to be restricted in what the practice of licensed therapy is. And if you were to ever undergo an audit or a review by a state agency due to maybe something that you did in your coaching business, you would not want them to see that legally contained within the same entity. That would be very confusing for them, and it would potentially be problematic from a client perspective as well. Are they engaging you as a therapist if you're putting client service agreements in place out of the same entity that also provides therapy?
Okay.
I just don't think that legally it's possible.
Right.
While I don't practice law in Colorado, what I tell people over and over very clearly is that if you are a licensed professional, there are some very specific reasons you do not want to house a coaching business under the same legal entity.
Okay.
And so I absolutely would encourage you to set it up as a separate business. You'll get so let's talk about what that takes. Let's pretend that you're setting up an LLC. There's going to be a state filing fee, right? You might have some initial formation issues around like getting an operating agreement in place. I provide, if it's single member, I provide some templates on my site.
Okay.
You could certainly hire an attorney in your state to create one for you. That operating agreement doesn't need to be filed anywhere, but it needs to be executed and put into your files.
Okay.
Because it's the final step of properly creating an LLC. If you were to ever add somebody to your business, that's the point where I would say, yes, definitely get legal support, get something custom put in place, because a 2-person LLC is much like a partnership. You've got a lot of issues to address and unwind within that.
Okay.
Very different than a single member LLC where you have authority over everything. You're not going to fight with yourself about those decisions, right? Etc. So the risk is much lower is all I'm saying. Okay. So, from a setup standpoint, it's not cost exorbitant. And then you're going to have an annual filing fee where you renew that entity each year. You might have a licensing requirement depending on how the state of Colorado works, whether you have like a master state business license or a local license. Generally, licensing is dependent upon income. So like here in Seattle, if you're under a certain threshold, your annual license is going to cost you, $50 or whatever. Otherwise, it's going to cost you $60 or $100 if you make more than a certain threshold. So sometimes licensing is set up that way, but I mean, you're talking about minimal fees per year. Right. The state just wants to track your activities, make sure that you have an account that you report taxes through, et cetera. Right. So like local, B&O taxes, et cetera. But it is not prohibitive.
Okay. All
right. Especially if you're really active in your business. Now, if you're somebody who's a hobbyist, like, oh, I'm going to explore coaching, I don't really know if I want to do it. Right. We might be having a different discussion, but the fact that you're a licensed professional, you've got a license to protect primarily if you're interested in continuing to practice under that license for now.
Okay.
Right. And if you have any personal assets, that's the other part of the conversation is I would say, absolutely don't risk your personal assets by starting a coaching business without a legal entity in place to contain that liability.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Carrie, and then I think Marilyn, and then Kathleen.
Let's see. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Good. First of all, thank you for your help with my client services agreement. I've already signed a new client using it, and it was fantastic. So thank you.
Woohoo! I'm so excited. I just have to tell you, at the same time, I was working on another client's new client service agreement. She was really nervous. She kept saying, well, I feel like, putting all this legal language in place, like people are not going to sign it or it'll scare them or whatever. And she laughed because the first client that she signed, she signed like 4 clients last week after she got this agreement in place. She was like, my first client didn't want to do my $3,000 service. They wanted the $5,000 service. And so she was like, it was totally wrong. It helped the agreement. I mean, the agreement helped the client relationship, did not hurt. So I was like, woohoo. The number of times I've heard that.
Yeah, it was great. So thank
Good.
you.
You're so welcome.
And just to go back to the copyright infringement that you were talking about, I heard you mentioned that there were some exemptions. And so you mentioned news websites. Is that an exemption? I mean, could I use a video from a news story as an example?
Got it. Yeah. So around fair use. So fair use exemptions, there's a list of them. And I might be able to, let me just see, I should probably write an article or you're right. There are a list of exemptions where basically you can use certain copyrighted material without obtaining permission. But generally the tough part is in the context of business, because you're commercializing usually the use of that information there, it's unlikely to be seen as fair use if you're using it in a business. Now, what I was talking about is if you're a news agency yourself and you're using somebody else's content because you're commenting on it or it's newsworthy, that's gonna be considered fair use, right? For certain satire or parody examples, right? There are some exceptions that are allowed in those circumstances. If you are in public education, right? Because education, you're not capitalizing on that material. You're using it to educate. That's going to be fair use generally, right? So the trouble with use in business is, and while everything, it's a case by case analysis. So unfortunately, there is no bright line rule on this stuff, but it's really, really challenging in the context of business to use other people's content and actually claim fair use.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The other question I had was just a unrelated question to that, but hopefully a quick one. And it's not even a legal question, but I think you'll know the answer. What is the best way to set up ACH payments that's just simple and easy? Is there a way that you would suggest to set those up?
Well, do you have, I would say, so it sounds like maybe you don't have a payment processor yet in place.
I use Stripe.
You use Stripe. Okay. How do they handle ACH?
Oh, I'm not sure. There's a lot
Not
of
sure.
Stripe and I don't love it. So
yeah. So I'd recommend there is a local company. Let me send this to everybody in the chat, called Gravity Payments. It's run by a guy named Dan Price. They've got 200 local employees. They exclusively serve small businesses and they provide payment processing services. They have a section of their business that's called Gravity Legal. And so I use them for my legal payments. What I like about them is that, one, they had very, very competitive rates. They charge lower fees than almost any other processor that I've found, and no fees on debit cards or ACH, which is wire transfers essentially, right? So, the thing that I also like about their format is you can set up a business payment link. So like your master payment link, and that could be the link that gets sent out on all your invoices. Right. And so your clients pop in, pay there, and through that payment link, they can opt for credit card, debit card, ACH transfer. They can choose what fits for them. And then it's a matter of just monitoring on the back end whether that payment clears, making sure that you mark your invoices as paid, et cetera.
That's great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah,
but they're very responsive. And if I've ever had any issue, it's like same day response, and they are on it and investigating it. So their customer service I have found to be excellent.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Great to see you.
You too.
All right. I think Marilyn was next and then Kathleen.
Yeah. So thank you. I got scammed. And so my money's tied up, but as soon as it's not, I'm buying your package. Thank you for writing those speaker agreements. I want them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that'll take care of when I have a summit and I have speakers. Now what's happening is that people are starting to ask me to speak on their summits. And, I had a conversation with one lady and I said, well, what do you do with the recording of my interview with you? And she said, oh, well, once we have it, it's ours. And I don't want to speak anywhere until I have a clear agreement about that. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, the trick with, all of those kinds of events online generally is that, there's no consistent agreement out there. People are generally using their own. Often they've pieced it together from something that they participated in. So, across the board with any contract, this is, my advice for people are that, one, you take the time to review it carefully, right? Like you did, and ask any questions that you don't, if there's information that's missing or certain topics or points that you just don't understand, have a clarifying conversation, revise the contract as necessary. What I tell people about contracts is they are only good as they are clear. So if they're confusing, you need to clear them up, right? If there's something that is not written well, needs to be cleared up. And accurate. You can have clarity, but maybe it's not accurate. Maybe it doesn't actually apply to your scenario. So for example, if you have a contract that says, we're going to record the entire event, and somebody's actually like, oh, no, it turns out it's just live. We're not recording it because we want people to show up live and that's it. You either are there or you're not. But the contract says they're recording it. I'd want you to clarify that point and say, look, in this scenario, we're not recording it. Like, let's remove the language that says there's going to be a recording of it. Right. Or maybe they say, yeah, we're recording it, but we own the recordings and you don't get a copy. And maybe you say that doesn't work for me. I'll participate so long as I also have a copy that I can share to my tribe or, put in my media appearances or whatever. And they agree to that. Then you want to clear up the language and say, in this instance, Summit host is also going to provide a copy of the recording to Marilyn by X date, right? So remember, clarity and then accuracy, right? Contracts are only as good as they are clear and accurate. So if there's any confusion, and this happens a lot, that what we talk about in person and agree to ends up not being what is reflected in the document. And that's usually because people are doing the best they can, but they're working from some template version of a document or something they've seen somebody else use, and they're not an expert in what it says and how to use that document the right way. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and say, well, this doesn't make sense to me. How about we clear it up and use this language, which is much clearer, that says exactly what we intend it to say.
It's helpful.
Yeah.
Also want to thank you. This guy that scammed me, I kept careful track of, I documented each thing that wasn't delivered, etc. And I could do that because of how you taught me to take care of my own stuff. And in his stuff, there he says there's no refunds, but that's never said on anything. So that's one of my key points to get my money back. And so thank you for that.
Excellent. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm sorry to hear about the circumstances, but I'm glad to hear that you felt empowered to stick up for yourself.
Yeah, it was tough. It became hostile.
Became what?
It became a traumatic experience for me.
Yeah. Oh, I hate hearing that stuff. And it is a reminder that there are people online that take advantage of others, and a lot of us are, especially if we're straightforward and we tend to trust people and have open communication, it can be a surprise to end up in business with somebody that you learn has really poor business practices or very low level of ethics.
Yeah, definitely. And this was referred to me by somebody I trust. So,
oh, shoot. Well, and in those circumstances, a couple things. One, standing up for yourself and doing what you can to address the scenario and, have it fixed, whether it's going through the refund request with the credit card company or the payment processor or some other avenue. But also providing that feedback to the referral source. And obviously, we can't all be responsible for our referrals. But I would want to know, and I do ask people, if I've referred somebody, like, please let me know how they do. If I would personally want to know so that I can stop referring business if that tends to be a practice that they have, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
glad to see you here today.
Thanks.
Yeah. All righty. I think, let's see, did Kathleen have to leave? It looks like maybe she had to leave. All right. Well, great. Those were good questions for today. I will have to, there was one emailed question, but I'm actually thinking about starting a small kind of paid membership option for this call where people can send questions in advance to make sure they get addressed. But for today, I think the timing is perfect because I've got to pick my kiddos up at noon for lunch. I have to keep my son, who, like I said at the start of the call, has an eye injury, from engaging in recess and play. And, ask me how easy it is to keep a 9-year-old boy with ADHD, calm and on the couch and not running around. Woo-wee, we're in for a month, but fingers crossed that we can. It's like the ER doc said, your TV is unfortunately going to be your friend for the next month. And I'm like, oh my gosh, as if we already haven't had too much TV thanks to the pandemic.
Not easy.
Yeah, not easy. I know. Well, so good to see you all. I so appreciate you showing up, and I'm wishing you a wonderful week and I guess month, and come back next month if you have any new questions. All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Take good care.